Hello, I'm Per. In this video we're going to visit Skokloster Slot, an old castle in Håbo, northwest of Stockholm, close to the Great Lake Mälaren. This magnificent castle was built in the 17th century and is one of the biggest castles from the Baroque era in Europe. You can get here from central Stockholm with the private ferry operator Strömma or with a public transportation system combining commuter train and a bus. The boat tour is the most scenic way to get here, of course, and a treat in itself. But if you choose the commuter train and the bus, you can arrive earlier in the day and get more time to spend here. The first proprietor of the Skokloster Castle was Count Carl Gustav Wrangel. He was born in 1613 and died in 1676. He made a very successful career in the military, became a general and participated in the Great War that later got the name the 30 Years' War. For example, he commanded a naval force that defeated the Danish Navy in the Battle of Femern in 1644. He then became a close friend of King Karl X. The Swedish Empire was at its peak in the middle of the 17th century, and the king and the count were both fierce warriors who wanted to make Sweden great. Carl Gustav Wrangel was born here at Skokloster. He inherited the land here and wanted to build a castle here, although he already had a few castles in other places. The construction of the Skokloster Castle was commenced in 1654 but never completed. It came to a halt when Wrangel died in 1676. This castle was probably designed by the German architect Caspar Vogel, who knew Wrangel. And this castle has never belonged to the royal family and is not one of the royal castles in Sweden. In 1640, while serving in Germany, Carl Gustav Wrangel met a young German lady named Anna Margareta von Haugwitz. He was 27 years old and she was only 18. It was love at first sight and they got married just 2 weeks after they had first met. She was of noble descent but not very rich. Unlike many other prominent people at that time, they married because of love without any financial or political considerations. Their marriage was probably happy and they got 11 children, but not all of them lived to adult age. Anna Margareta died in Stockholm in March 1673, only 51 years old. Their oldest daughter, Margareta Juliana Wrangel, married Count Nils Brahe in 1660. Like her father, Nils Brahe was a high-ranking military officer who participated in the wars against Denmark. Since then, the Skokloster Castle has been in the hands of their descendants, the Brahe dynasty, well into the 20th century. In 1967 it was acquired by the government and then turned into a museum. Visitors to the Skokloster Castle can take a guided tour, walk around by themselves, or do both. If you walk around by yourself, you're not allowed to see the entire castle. You will have to take a guided tour to do that. I recommend that you start with a guided tour and then go back and take a second look at the rooms and the items that you think were the most interesting. This is Carl Gustav Wrangel's official bedroom. But he usually did not sleep here. This bedroom was used mainly for receptions. Here, very important guests could get the honor to talk to the Count while he was in bed. This is the armory, where Carl Gustav Wrangel kept his large collections of weapons. Most of them have been tested and would have worked in battle or for hunting. This is a so-called wall gun, a heavy weapon designed to be placed on a wall. It has several barrels that would be fired in a sequence. You would not want to be at the other end when this one was fired. Wrangel did not only collect weapons, he also collected other items from different parts of the world. For example, this canoe was used by the Inuit people of Greenland for seal hunting. And these armadillos were brought here from North America. This is the large dining room at the Skokloster Castle, called the Hall of Kings because of all the paintings of Swedish kings hanging on the walls here. Back in the late 17th century and early 18th century, Swedish kings were often painted like this, sitting on a big and strong horse to show how powerful they were. This is Karl XII, who became King of Sweden in 1697, only 15 years old. He is my personal favorite among Swedish kings and one of the greatest heroes in the history of Europe. He ruled Sweden in the early 18th century and fought bravely to defend his country against Russia and its allies Denmark, Poland and Saxony, who declared war on Sweden in 1700. This was the Great Nordic War. Karl XII spent most of his adult life abroad, personally leading his troops on the battlefields in Eastern Europe. He died in combat in Norway in 1718. The Great Nordic War ended in 1721, and by then Sweden had lost its territories on the other side of the Baltic Sea. This is the nursery where the children lived. This room was used as a nursery well into the 20th century.
Det går att åstadkomma över tid fantastiska saker med utrustning som idag skulle framstås.
The construction of the Skokloster Castle came to a halt when Carl Gustav Wrangel died in 1676. This hall has been left as it was then, with some of the equipment used by the construction workers. So this is probably one of the oldest construction sites in the world.
325 kvadratmeter stor, det är 1 kvadratmeter större än Kungliga slottet, 3 kronor, och det var med största sannolikhet ingen slump. Och 15 meter i takhöjd, och det skulle vara ett till stuckaturtak där målat med paradismotiv, otroligt påkostat. Och det här blir aldrig av. Myten säger då att anledningen till att det här aldrig blir färdigställt, det är att när Wrangel dör så tänker arbetarna att de inte ska få betalt och bommar igen, och så har det stått.
This is Andalus, a brave war horse that belonged to Crown Prince Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte in the early 19th century. He rode this horse in the Battle of Leipzig in 1813, where he fought against Napoleon's troops, his old countrymen. Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte was crowned to King of Sweden in 1818 and got the name Karl XIV Johan. He was a friend of Magnus Brahe, then proprietor of the Skokloster Castle. The king gave Magnus Brahe Andalus. So this fellow did not get a decent funeral when he died. Instead, he was stuffed, preserved, and placed here at the Skokloster Castle. Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, or Karl XIV Johan, ruled Sweden until his death in 1844. The castle also has a nice little restaurant where you can have lunch or afternoon coffee, indoors or outdoors. My lunch was good, but they could put more meat on the plate. Close to the castle lies Skokloster Kyrka, a beautiful church built in the 13th century. Hermann Wrangel, Carl Gustav Wrangel's father, had it renovated during the years 1620 to 1624, and the entire Wrangel family is buried here. The church has a large pipe organ, built later of course. This is the tomb of Carl Gustav Wrangel inside the church. The church also has its own little cafe, Sjövillan, where you can have lunch or coffee next to the shores of Mälaren. So if you're going on vacation in Stockholm, if you're interested in history and like to visit old castles, an excursion to Skokloster can be very interesting and very nice. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching.